to our main event. This is a historic event for us. It's the first time that our company has invited parents and educators in a space together to talk about data and trends. So we're really honored that you're spending this moment with us and this milestone with us. We're so honored to have all the stakeholders here. And we know that this is going to be the first of many events bringing stakeholders, parents, and educators together to strengthen schools. So thank you for being a part of this first one with us. Today, we hope you come away with context, which is an understanding of the data and trends that represent family voices, camaraderie, so just a feeling that families and educators are on the same page, and framing for the future. So what's on deck today? First, we're going to talk about what makes a trend a trend. Then we'll quickly cover 10 trends in family feedback according to our data. And then finally, we'll open the floor to our incredible panel to reflect on trends and answer audience questions. Here to help me introduce the top 10 trends is my colleague, Chima. Chima is Possip's growth and partnerships lead, so he offers strategic advice to districts and networks making family engagement plans for the future. Chima is a former middle school math teacher and teacher recruiter. Hey, Chima, you out there?
Yep, I'm here, and thanks for having me, Caitlin. I'm excited to be here with everyone for this event today. So our conversation today, I know, is centered about trends or around trends. So I think it'd be great to hear what makes a trend a trend.
That's a great question, Chima. In this conversation, our trends are determined by analyzing data quantitatively, qualitatively, and for tone and recurrence.
Interesting. So how do you do that exactly?
Yes, thanks for digging deeper. So we look at feedback gathered all year long from over 20,000 parents and educators. We look at sentiment in a structured way, asking consistently if people are happy and if their needs are being met, and then tracking that data week after week. So that's our quantitative data that we might talk about today. And then we also read and categorize all incoming praise and feedback, reading authentic voices and noting the tone and frequency of the topics that parents surface.
So you mentioned categorizing. Who or what is categorizing all of the praise and feedback from 200,000 parents and educators?
Chima, you know all the right questions to ask. Both our technology and our people review, categorize, and prioritize comments. So let me introduce you to a couple folks. This is our amazing tech team led by Adam and our incredible reporting team led by Amanda. They read reports, prioritize hot to cool topics, and create custom recommendations for follow-up. In fact, Amanda writes a summary of nationwide family trends every week and posts it to our blog.
So that's helpful in understanding how that happens. With all that being said, what did the reporting team read about this year?
Yes, so Amanda's team categorized comments into 6,000 themes this year. So check out this slide to see some of those top themes, but know that we're going to dig into several of these today. So just to give you a really solid understanding of the landscape, since July of last year, nearly 200,000 parents and 1,300 educators have shared feedback on their experiences with school, producing 8,000 reports for over 600 schools across the country in 26 states. These schools are very diverse. 60% are Title I, and parent feedback is shared in 60 languages. That means 15% of all the feedback shared is in languages other than English. That's a really diverse set of people sharing feedback, which makes for richer and more representative data.
Wow, that's really incredible. 60 languages. So I understand where the data is coming from and how it gets to schools. Shall we dig into these top trends now?
Let's do it, Chima. Want to kick it off for us?
Sure, yeah, I'll get us started with trend number one. So the most frequently occurring word in parent comments is teacher. So take a look at some of these powerful quotes. This year, unlike any other, parents acknowledge how teachers had to go above and beyond. To put in perspective, for every piece of feedback we received 8 praise comments for teachers. The word teacher occurred over 20,000 times. The second most frequently occurring word is great, and the third is thank you. So parents want to feel connected to teachers and praise them. And celebrating this relationship and strengthening it is absolutely what we should be doing during this time.
I love that, Chima. And it takes me straight into trend number 2, which is that more parents share praise than feedback. We're often asked if people are only sharing when they're upset or if they're only sharing when they're happy. And the answer is parents share what's going well and what they need. 53% of all comments that come into Possip are praise, and 47% of all comments are feedback. What we love about this trend is, of course, that praise takes the cake, but we also love that our partners can see that overall parents' comments are coming from a balanced place. Parents are on your team. It doesn't always feel like it in the moment, but when you look at your parents' comments throughout the entire year, you'll see that balance too. So to remind you that parents are on your team, we put together this quick little video from parents to educators, and I'm just going to switch over to that too so we can enjoy it.
I can't say enough about how remarkable my son's first grade teachers and school have been this year. After missing the end of kindergarten last year, my son went from struggling with reading and writing to greatly improving both his reading and writing skills this school year. From the teachers to the principal to other parents and even the front office staff, everyone has remained super positive and encouraging, and we needed a lot of encouragement this year. I don't know how you all have done it, but I am beyond grateful. Thank you.
I'm most grateful for the improvement of their grades this semester, and a special shout out to their amazing counselors, Miss Williams and Miss Panzel. Thank you.
Mi hijo se miraba deprimido ahora que empezó a ir de nuevo a la escuela. Se ve diferente. Gracias por todo.
I am really grateful for the abundance of communication that has come from our school over this last year. The text, the small celebrations, the emails, the phone calls, sometimes on a weekly basis, have been so meaningful and valuable to our family.
I'm so happy with the support of the caring staff, the vice principal, the educators, the IEP chair. I'm just so thankful for everything that they do.
I think that video really does tie into here that parents are happier than people may think. In a year with pandemic frustrations, we've actually seen parents expressing similar levels of happiness this year as they did last year. We've seen a range of happiness between 40 and 80%, but on average, happiness between our school partners is 82%. So there are degrees of variability in the happiness. For example, parents at Title I schools are slightly happier. Parents with students in elementary school are also slightly happier. Interestingly, the happiest elementary school parents most likely praise teachers, whereas the happiest middle school and high school parents are more likely to praise operations. And actually, Caitlin, I think that really ties in well into our next trend on operations. If you could tell us a little bit more about that.
Yes, I love trend number 4. School operations are foundational for family happiness. So let's talk more about this one. Schools with lower parent happiness have more feedback on operations than schools with higher parent happiness. So you can see on the slide there that as praise about operations is going up, feedback about operations is going down, and that's moving across the screen as happiness increases, as that sentiment score increases too. the three. So data shows us that as sentiment ratings or happiness increases, feedback for operations decreases and praise for operations increases, as I just told you. So we should acknowledge that this year, there has been a high percentage of feedback categorized as operations. Parents use Possip to communicate about operations more than any other category this year. It was 45% of all praise and feedback. Nonetheless, this is a trend that has stood the test of time. We saw it last year too. And it makes sense, right? In this category, the operations category are things that are most visible to parents and show up in their everyday experiences. So operations are generally about the organization and the school. So it makes sense that it will impact how parents feel about the school. We see it as a good reminder that so much is happening outside of the teacher-parent relationship and that the organization needs to be solid too. And we also see in staff feedback that teachers and staff are asking for operational changes and sometimes the same operational changes as parents. This trend, I love it so much because it really can be helpful and it can help you solve and lean into operational issues and build strong ops teams and systems. In a year when so much has been out of control and unknown, this is a point of empowerment because strong operations and communications are a statement of your brand and culture, and they're something that you can really work with your team on. So we frame this trend as an opportunity to prioritize ops and to improve relationships and overall happiness. And Chima, before you move on to number 5, just a quick shout out to all of our ops teams.
All right, thanks, Caitlin. So number 5, parents and families need multiple at-bats or opportunities to share and engage. This is an important trend for achieving equity and reach. Possip data shows that response rates by pulse check are typically lower for Title I eligible schools, sometimes half as much. However, when we look at cumulative response rates, the percentage of people heard from as the year continues, we see that gap closing. This is simply to say families in Title I schools may need more attempts at outreach to have an equal opportunity to provide feedback. And with multiple attempts at engagement at Title I and non-Title I schools begins to even out. So we also know Title I families are more likely to respond by SMS. So interestingly, the data also shows that once Title I families are in a pattern of engaging, they provide many more comments and more praise. And this may indicate that once families feel included and invited to share, they are eager to do so. And our next trend really highlights how important it is for families to be prompted to share.
Yeah, and just quickly before we move on, I love this image and want to just explain what it is to our audience. So basically, this is an image of how our response rates, our cumulative response rates and the new voices of parents we've heard from increases throughout the year. So it's just this idea that the more opportunities to share and engage you give, the more new voices you will continue to hear from throughout the year. It just takes people several times to engage sometimes, which is why the routine nature can be so helpful. Moving on to trend number 6, families need a space to share vulnerabilities and basic needs. So barriers and obstacles are multiplied in different times. We all know this and felt it so deeply this year. Throughout the pandemic, more and more schools started asking routinely, are your needs being met? And parents shared 1,800 comments or more on critical needs. We had 500 comments on critical food needs and 1,300 comments on critical tech needs. And these are so important to us, each and every one, because each and every one is a story of a family who was able to get assistance in terms of food or tech. And so they're super, super important comments that were elevated to schools and meant a lot to these families' lives. It's important to give families an outlet to share these kinds of vulnerabilities. They may not feel comfortable sharing these needs verbally, so creating alternative spaces to do so is super important. One of our partners in Nashville reminded us that parents express needs through Possip that they don't always share in person, even when they've just been to visit the school. So this speaks to the power of additional outlets for sharing needs. Well, polarized views are expected and can be helpful is the next one that we're going to talk about. In our pulse checks this year, we have seen some very polarizing topics surfaced. Some of these topics included wearing masks, racial justice and equity work, and more. The reality is that these topics led to divergent and strong opinions. And you can see there listed on the slide the types of topics that we're speaking of. This trend may not surprise you in and of itself that these kinds of topics would have polarizing views, but it's so important to think about how you want to react to this knowledge. So surveying parents and asking for feedback on decisions allows schools and districts to avoid making assumptions and instead get data on how polarizing a topic is, what point of views may be on either side, and just how prominent that polarization and those opinions are. If you don't have a pulse on what people think, even on the most polarizing topics, you might be surprised. And surveying folks helps you get in front of those surprises and prepare your communications and your team accordingly.
Our eighth trend, families crave quality communication. Communication is one of our biggest categories of feedback. Personally, I'm always searching for more understanding of what communication as a trend means. So there's so much that goes into it. So we posed the question to Amanda, and we were able to identify few key focus areas and communications requests from parents based on feedback. And just to kind of highlight a few of them, a communication hub that stays updated, communication in advance, calendar of events, consistent schedules, easy to find information online, good outreach, and tech support. Quality communication is routine, it's open, clear, celebratory, and multimodal, which breaks down into the acronym ROCK'em if you're following along. So next time communication efforts start to feel overwhelming, check back with the acronym or your Possip data to make sure you are meeting parents' biggest communication needs.
And trend number 9, parents want to be able to know and support their students' academic growth, no matter what their students' academic level. One of our top 3 trends in family feedback this year was about academic progress. We saw that when schools closed and grading paused, parents didn't know how to measure progress. Then parents had students next to them in their homes, and they began to see and understand their students' level of skill and progress intimately. But now, as new in-person learning programs begin, parents feel a sense of loss and disconnection with their students' progress. So the takeaway here is that parents have been asking for standards all year long. And those standards can look different for different districts and schools, of course, but the important thing is to make sure that parents understand the standards. If your measures of success are evolving, and we know that some schools are completely rethinking homework, some districts are completely rethinking schedules. So if those measures of success are evolving, bring parents along with your decisions to ensure that at any given point, success can be articulated by all of your stakeholders. And to finish sharing our top 10 trends, I'm going to pass the mic to Possip CEO Shawnee Dow.
Thank you. This has been so fun, and I am super excited actually to hear parents and what they're thinking in the chat. This resonates, and then also our panel. But before we get to that, I'm going to share our 10th and final trend, which is that parent feedback among our 600 plus school partners is more alike than different. So I founded Possip a little over 4 years ago, and only about 4 months ago did I stop reading just about every report. And part of why I was so committed to reading every report is because I wanted to make sure each report represented the quality and impact we aspire to at Possip. I wear the hat of the former teacher, of a parent, and I'm married to a school administrator. I know how important this information is. I know how important it is for the voices of families to be heard and for schools to get actionable praise and feedback that can be acted upon very quickly. So these are so important to me. I've now passed that torch on to Amanda. But what I've seen since our founding, and more than ever this year, and since we experienced this year and grew to working in 26 states with 400,000 parents, what we saw is this: whether family members are in Hawaii or Oregon, Texas or Maine, whether they speak English or Arabic or Spanish or French, whether they're conservative or liberal, whether they're a young parent or a grandparent, trying to support their student while working as a healthcare worker, a teacher. No matter what, they share many of the same needs and concerns. They want their child to be known and seen. They want to be known and seen. They want a partner in the school and district, and they want the school to provide transformational opportunities for their kids and their family. So when you remove an agenda, social media, politics, you see at our essence that we share so much in common. And that's what's really powerful about looking at feedback around certain times of year. You can see that throughout the country, parents and families are identifying some of the same challenges and also some of the same wins. So whether you're here on this call as a family member, a staff member, or a district or school leader, just remember that we have so much more in common than we have different, and that we're on the same team and on the same page for our students and for our children. So in that spirit, I am so excited to turn to our panel. This is the part that I am personally most excited about. True to Possip, as much as we love sharing information out, we love to get perspectives and feedback and information in. We're excited for you all to get to hear from our incredible panel. Before we start our panel, we're going to give you the opportunity to choose where the conversation goes. Again, we love the voices of the community. So in a few seconds, a poll will appear through the magic of Jasmine. A poll will appear on your screen. There it goes. And you will select 2 trends you'd like to focus the conversation on. So we're going to talk about different trends will come up, but select the top 2 trends you'd like to focus the conversation on. And then for the next 30 minutes or so, we'll have a conversation with you and this incredible group. All right, so go ahead and vote. So I'm particularly seeing 5 through 8.
Yeah, 5 and 6.
5 through 8 popping up. Okay, so cool. All right, so we are going to turn to our panel. So for context, we thought in the what you've heard probably about us is we very much so strongly believe in the power of bringing families and educators together to strengthen schools. And so we're going to hear from a panel that's composed of 3 educators and 3 parents, and there's probably a bit of a Venn diagram where a number of folks are both. So on the parent side, we have Satara Jones. You may recognize her as the lovely actress from one of the videos. She's the mom of a preschooler, a high schooler, and an 8-month-old. So as you can imagine, this past year, she's been busy. She's also a former teacher. She taught in Chicago, who also works in ed tech now at Go Noodle. Joining Satara, we have Annie Pogue in Nashville, Tennessee. She's the mom of a middle schooler, an elementary schooler, and a preschooler. She's also a social worker in the healthcare setting, and she's the head of a school parent association at one of our partner Possip schools. Finally, on the parent side, we've got Corey Von Loo in Jacksonville, Florida. He also is a parent. He's a Possip reporting specialist and a current teacher who has served in an admin role as well, including as a principal at a school when it was Possip. While all of our panelists have diverse backgrounds, they're wearing their parent hat today. So they're awesome parents and insightful people, which is why we asked them to join us. We've got some incredible educators today on the panel as well. We've got Dr. Gregory Rodriguez, who already got some shout outs in the chat. So Dr. Rodriguez is the superintendent of EdCouch Elsa Independent School District in EdCouch, Texas. We mentioned he's in South Texas. Dr. Rodriguez has worked in education across the country from Connecticut, and now he leads a district in Texas near the Mexico border. We've got Dr. Celia Conley in Nashville. Dr. Conley is the executive director of a cluster of Metro Nashville Public Schools, and she's previously served as a middle school principal in the district that used Possip for 2 years, and now she leads multiple schools. We've got Aaron Townsend. He is based in Maine. He is assistant superintendent for Portland Public Schools in Portland, Maine, and he brings 20 years of experience to the table, something that folks might be really interested to know. Portland, Maine has a number of languages also that are spoken in the district, so they really get to work with all of these leaders are working in very diverse and interesting districts. So, okay, all of these educators are passionate about equity, family voice, and impact, and they know how to get work done as leaders, so that's why we picked them to join us. So thank you all for being here today. Before we get into the specific trends, I'd love to hear your initial reactions to these trends. What crossed your mind when you heard them? So Dr. Conley, we'll start with you, and then Corey will want to hear from you next.
Good afternoon, everyone. I definitely was nodding my head listening to all of these because they resonated, and several of these could be, combined together. But I think Caitlin was sharing at this point, or maybe Chima, but hit the nail on the head about particularly in Title I families. So our district is primarily comprised of several Title I schools. And then also at the middle school level. So I'm a middle school person. SMS, that's when it changed the game. We can send, we've had for years communications in Blackboard and, Parent Link and other platforms, parents getting email contacts and all of that. But it's something about the palm of your hand and a cell phone that people feel more comfortable. I don't want to say more anonymous, but I think it's because we use it for everything in life that it's just easier. Like, oh, okay, you're sending me this. Yeah, I'll, just text it because it's short. I think parents feel comfortable and vulnerable, just writing brief words, doesn't have to be sentences. And then the fact that it's translated. So I think definitely Possip provides the avenue to have multiple at-bats. And also, there's several other ways to do things of that nature. And I was kind of combining this one with, because I liked number 9. I picked that parents want to be able to know and support their students' academic growth, no matter the level. And that's true. I initially was a special ed teacher, so I've always historically worked with those that were not on grade level or needed extensive needs. And so that is so true. Like parents desperately want to know, where is their child at? What growth have they accomplished? How can they help at home? So I think a lot of times in education, we can kind of make assumptions that, oh, well, the parent, they don't have time to do that, or, but send it to them anyway. They might have, the child may go home over the weekend to a cousin that may be able to work with them, or, if child's in multifamily households, they want to be able to do it. So this one hit the nail on the head, that they need multiple at-bats to share, but also as educators, we have to ensure we're sharing all, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so data is data, and we have to be comfortable sharing that to families.
That's great, thank you. Corey, kind of your parent hat on, what resonated, with you?
Yeah, so, thank you for having the space today. This is really great, to share. So I think about, like, as a parent, we get busy, right? I've got a middle schooler, I got a 14-year-old, he's about to transition to high school. I got a 2nd grader. So like our life is filled with lots of busy things. And so having the opportunity to have multiple at-bats to share something is super important. I might not have something to share that week. Maybe something wasn't so salient for me to be able to, I'm going to go and call the principal right now, right? Like I need to go down there and make my voice heard. But there are also opportunities where, like, oh, you know what? My son mentioned something to me. Let me mention that and some feedback. And so, like, having these multiple at-bats, these multiple avenues, two-way communication, like me being able to share, very open-ended. Like that's one thing I like about the Possip surveys. They're very open-ended. Like where do you want to share? Being able to keep it open versus sometimes we get like these very direct, what do you think about this, this, and this? This is very, sometimes it can be very broad and allow me to bring in things that my sons mentioned to me that we need to bring up and communicate with the teachers or the front office or admin. So.
Awesome. Dr. Rodriguez, I'm curious, is there anything in the trends that surprised you? If so, we'd love to hear what some of those are. And Tara, want to hear from you after that.
So good afternoon, everyone. Happy to be on the call today. Just like Shani, I've read every report for my district and I look forward to reading them on Monday morning. And one of the things that surprises me the most is that it is true that parents do need multiple attempts at communication. I was surprised to look at the data and to see every time a pulse check goes out, we have additional parents who are the first time respondents, even though they've been asked every other week for the entire semester. We have new respondents that ultimately will chime in. They know that the pulse checks are not going away and that we do want to hear from them. And so that's really important for us as a district, because what Possip has really given us is that ability to hear those voices that we often don't get to hear. And particularly when it comes around being able to praise our staff, because our staff need to know that the work that they do matters. And a lot of times they only hear the negative when it's on the other end of the phone. So what I love about Possip so far is that our staff have been able to get the positive praise and the feedback. So the greatest thing about the feedback is that we're able to close the loop when parents have concerns. I'm able to get my administrators right on to any hot topics that emerge or percolate up during the pulse checks. And just I've been really happy with the communication that we've been able to achieve in our district so far this year.
Yeah, and that was, I think one of the things you shared, which is so powerful, is just how often teachers are praised. But one of the things that we saw is that we would also often even see parents saying like, hey, how are teachers being taken care of? How's their safety? So often I think, unfortunately, because it's potentially like an easier political narrative or for some other reason, we often see that parents, and if you look on social media, it looks like parents and teachers are at each other's throats. But what we saw were parents wanting to make sure teachers were also being taken care of and wanting to share all of the great things, and also appreciating how, I mean, a lot of teachers are parents too, so appreciating that someone's trying to teach while their kids also in the background as well. So I think that's super powerful. Satara, I would love to hear some of your thoughts. Anything surprising there in terms of the trends that you saw from a parent perspective?
Yeah. Also, good afternoon, everyone. I'm really excited to be here and to contribute to this conversation. One thing that surprised me was that parents are happier than we expected, right? So as a parent, I've been through the frustrations of remote learning and also the frustrations of hybrid learning. But I think at the end of the day, you always return back to being really grateful for the teachers and for the staff and for the hard work that everyone's putting in. So I think you just touched on it too, Shani, is it seems like, on the surface, everyone's a little upset with each other, but at the end of the day, we have so much more in common. We're all leveling with each other and realizing like we're all getting through this together. We're a team more than anything. So I'm more excited than ever to see what happens next year as more schools return to in-person learning and how the relationship building that has occurred due to remote learning really evolves into the next school year.
Well, it's been funny even seeing with the return to in-person, two things. We didn't share this in the data, but we are seeing parent happiness increase, especially if, as they go back to in-person, which is not surprising. But also schools are saying parents are so much more patient now. They're like, they can appreciate what the past years was. Erin, I'm so curious to hear from an educator perspective, and you can choose one of the kind of three trends in particular, but would love to hear from you. So I'm going back up to the trends. If any of these in particular resonate in terms of needing multiple at-bats, we've heard a bit about that one. Families needing a space to share vulnerabilities and basic needs. We'd love to hear any of your thoughts on that trend, or in the trend about polarized views are to be expected and can be helpful. So curious if you have any thoughts on any of those topics.
Yeah, good afternoon. It's exciting to be here. We've really valued having, I think a number of the comments, have really resonated with our experience. And I felt like, the trends didn't surprise because I feel like that's what we've seen. So it was interesting. I mean, I think that comment about it's been more similar across schools, as you guys have this national perspective, is an interesting one given the landscape of how different, this year has unfolded in many places. But, I think it's been critical for us to get into this routine of having a space where families can expect to be able to raise up needs or concerns. So I think it was that last trend there about being, having some space to be vulnerable. We've definitely seen families take advantage of that. And I would say in particular, multilingual families, where there was just really challenges. I mean, we have an amazing team. I mean, in Portland, Maine, we have 65 to 70 languages spoken given, at any given time. And we really struggle to be able to make it accessible for everybody. We have a fabulous team of parent community specialists that represent those folks, but we always struggled with surveys and getting input in that really representing our community. So I think most of those things in terms of the vulnerabilities, whether it was around technology needs, housing needs, food needs, right? We've seen things come through our Possip speaking to all of those issues. And I would say, I mean, I haven't done the full data, but I would often see those coming in a language other than English. And it being translated and our administrators being able to make those connections for families to be able to support them to stay engaged. So that's been just another way to ensure we're being able to provide families what they need to be, to be successful and stay engaged with school. And I think that's helped to contribute. I mean, it has really, just as, a number of you have spoken on the panel, with the discourse that occurs about in-person learning or not, just the satisfaction and the happiness rates, really, I think have been a kind of like an anchor for us. despite whatever rhetoric might be happening kind of in other public venues and board meetings and so forth, that, we are making good decisions, our families are behind us. The praise and appreciation for our teachers and administrators has really been a bedrock that's helped us get through a very challenging year.
Okay. Dr. Conley, did I see you raise your hand?
Yes, I'm used to Teams, so I'm still playing around with playing it up. But just piggybacking off of Mr. Townsend with that, I think the caveat with this is it's important for the school and the district also to support the school. But when parents do share that, you have to be able to act upon that. So as Shani said, some of our schools in our district this is their first year using Possip. And so, it takes time to know how to use it, how to build in, like you said, we're all busy, how to build in that time. But, you don't want a parent to share a need on the survey and no one saw it or no one did anything. So I'm really kind of preaching and helping my teams, my principals understand to make a team and kind of develop some of those areas, and going back to the trend about operations, that's what's visible to parents. So maybe you might take your key areas for feedback from the Possip survey and create little groups among that. So I might take mine and, okay, anything with bullying goes to this person. Anything with basic needs goes to my family involvement specialist or my community partner. So that I just wanted to add that, because that's, as you build this up, that's just something to be very mindful of. The worst thing is you get a survey and nobody reads it. And also with the praise as well. So I was looking at some of my schools this week and I love the addition of that you guys added, the copy feature, where you can just easily copy it and I can start an email to the principal. Hey, did you see this? Or hey, they shouted out, the one I emailed this week, they shouted out this staff member 3 times in one survey. And I looked back, I said, let me see this employee. I don't know her. And she was a secretary. So how powerful is that she's getting, some praise from a parent that child's not even, might spend 5 minutes with her. So just saying, you want to probably look at having a group that can help immediately respond to the Possip survey. So
Love it. Annie Pogue, would love to hear from you with your parent hat on as a social worker who works with lots of parents. So curious what, anything surprising that you heard or anything that just is kind of deep on your heart?
Well, I love Possip as a parent. As a social worker, just hearing the statistics that the data that y'all were putting up just made me so grateful as I work with a lot of English language learners. And so as a parent, I think I love that it makes me stop and reflect on the week and think about, it makes me slow down because like others were saying, we're moving so quickly and I have multiple children and working. So it makes me stop and think. And then if it wasn't an email, I would not do it. I'll just be honest.
You know what it is about text versus email or paper? Because we do hear parents like multiple ways of being communicated with. So curious to hear your thoughts on that. What are the ways in which you like to be communicated with?
I think it could vary. I understand that people want multiple avenues. I think for me, a lot of it is, if it were something honestly negative feedback or more a concern, I would email. I think the positive part is what I often send in the text, that I would not honestly stop. It's small things that each week you wouldn't maybe say at a conference, or you wouldn't send an email, but it's the little things that you're like, oh, I really appreciated that this teacher did this, or the front desk person reached out to me and asked about XYZ. And so I think for me, it's the small bits of praise that I'm more likely I would not be as likely to send if it was not in a text format. Where if I have an issue, like a concern, I'm going to make sure that's said. Mm-hmm. But if I have a positive thing, that can kind of slip. And I think that's kind of human nature, is that we kind of can hold on to our concerns, but then let the positive kind of go by, where I think I love that Possip has allowed me to really express my gratitude. That is there. And I have an avenue for it where I honestly wouldn't sit down and stop my day and sit down at a computer to send kind of a small encouragement. But Possip allows me to do that.
Well, it's interesting. I'm going to take that and maybe take it in a different direction, which is, I think part of what you said is like the ability and opportunity to share gratitude, whereas you have to kind of go out of your way. And so typically, I think historically people have done that when they're more frustrated than when they're happy. But one of the benefits is also, I'm going to go back to the polarizing views topic. I don't know if someone particularly wants to take that, but part of why I think that's important is because, and Aaron, you talked about this, but sometimes the loudest voices are, well, of course, they're the loudest voices, but also they're not always the majority, but you don't have a way of knowing that because all the people who are content are like sitting quietly and content, you know, kind of in their own space. So how do you think about that? This is like a time, I mean, I've been around for a while. You can probably see through my hair that, you know, I've lived some years, and it's like polarizing like no other time. So I think especially for schools where, you know, I always joke schools work with every human, like, you know, so how do you all think about that kind of idea of navigating and leading in such a time that's so polarizing?
Yeah, I mean, I think just to our, you know, the comment I was referring to earlier, you know, as we faced multiple moments, you know, of decision making about our mode of schooling, you know, throughout the year, you know, there were many loud voices, you know, at board meetings and virtual board meetings, you know, and it didn't necessarily reflect, it really reflected, particularly for our community, a very particular segment of our community. And the ability to have a broader based kind of consistent feedback tool that was not out there designed to get just like specific feedback on the one issue, but just like what is their experience with our schools, and we could characterize and use the trends, right, the hot topics and things like that that were coming up, and the overall just kind of trend of the sentiment rates really helped to provide grounding, as I said earlier, for our board around the decisions we had made, right, and what we were kind of proposing moving forward to help kind of you know, moderate, you know, the kind of tone of the conversation in those kinds of public settings. So it was data that we used to kind of reference to support those recommendations with what we were doing. And now we've made some advances, increased in-person instruction, which has been great. It's been really fascinating to track the impact of that on the happiness rates, and just seeing a lot of kind of continued feedback and comments that have helped to really reinforce a really positive feedback cycle in terms of like teachers and leaders and school teams doing incredibly hard work, and getting some positive feedback for that, continuing to lean in for students and families, and then that being acknowledged and supported. So it's really been a great culture boost in a year where we thought culture was kind of tearing us apart a bit. We really kind of are closing the year on a really it's amazing to say, like on somewhat of a positive note, and some of the feedback that we get through Possip and other means is one of the ways that kind of is helping to land for folks.
Yeah, I kind of want to echo what Aaron's saying is, you know, not only do I use Possip for staff and community, but I mean, for community, but I've been using it with my staff because a lot of times the loudest voices are the voices that get heard. And what Possip's been able to do is bring in other people who would otherwise not chime in. And so, you know, you hear one narrative because it's the loudest narrative, but it's not necessarily the only narrative. And what Possip's done is given voice to those staff members who may not speak up in a public board meeting or may not go to their principal, but they'll quickly send in a short SMS text to talk about their experience. And it gives you that other point of view that, you know, we think we're polarized, or we think this is a direction or the negativity everybody's feeling around a topic, but it's just not true because there's so many other voices that are telling a whole different story. And, you know, I'm able to see that through the data with my staff as well.
And I think that's powerful. And I think that also gets back to some of what we saw, even in terms of parent happiness. And like I said, I don't think we shared all of this because there was just so much to share. But I think one of the things Chima mentioned was that parents who attended Title I schools actually showed higher happiness rates. And part of why that's powerful and is important is because sometimes those parents are not showing up at board meetings. And so people make assumptions about what they think about their schools or the quality of their schools or how satisfied they are with their schools. And so just the opportunity for those parents to say, hey, I'm here and I can appreciate what our school is doing and I love my kid's school. Or maybe I don't love my kid's school, but at least they can get the opportunity to share that. And so I think that's super important and powerful. Would love some of the audience members to put some of your questions in here. So not seeing any yet, but definitely let us know and track some of those questions. I'm curious, and any of the parents, and again, yeah, I imagine a lot of y'all are wearing multiple hats, but our parent panelists or family member panelists, I'm curious, what would be one of your kind of hopes as you have some educators on here and these educational leaders? What is something that you want them to know kind of as we do think about closing out, you know, I would say probably one of the most challenging years of all of our lives. So what's something that you would want them to know or be thinking about?
Go. I have had a very different experience with a middle schooler and then elementary. They're in two different schools. And seeing the difference in communication, communicate. I know it's tiring and I know that y'all are exhausted and working so hard behind the scenes. But as a parent, you kind of sometimes forget that, especially if you don't feel like you know what is happening. And especially this year when so much is unknown, even to say, we don't know, but we are working on this. Even if the same email is basically being said each week, seeing an email from a head of school or a principal means a lot as a parent. And so I had one school that was very on top of communication and emailing weekly and just letting us know, like, we're working on this, but it's a moving target. It's a moving case. And then it was kind of silence with the other. And that was hard. It made me realize how much that other school leader was doing, and made me want more from the other, and realizing he's working hard as well, but he's not communicating with us.
Thank you.
I would have to agree. I don't think it's possible to over communicate, especially in a year like this, or to over follow up. I really was thinking, you know, in the same path as Celia when she was saying, you can have all of this feedback and all of this information, but if you're not circling back with parents, you're not checking up with them, the participation, I imagine, is going to fall completely off because they're like, I just shared this information and nobody got back to me. So now I'm not going to share any information moving forward. So I would just say that as much as it's important to communicate, it's also just as important to listen and to follow up as well, and to make some changes based on the feedback that you're receiving.
Yeah, and I think that communication part of what you all are both sharing also gets back to, you know, what Dr. Collin was sharing with that operations trend. It is so hard. I mean, I think so often in education, a lot of us, I'll speak for myself, I'm not the most organized person in the world, but there's so much that needs to happen on some sort of routine or cadence. And so creating some sort of operations really is so important. And I think it sometimes can get overlooked, but it is how communications happens because you have a plan and then you like work that plan. So that's super important. I saw, if any of you want to share, and Lanita, we'll share quickly. Chima's going to share quickly at the end. But I saw a question from Carrie about yeah, it's a great question. How do schools use the teacher praise, and how do you think about it as a help with staff morale or teacher retention, especially in this year where, you know, the expectations are that we're going to lose more teachers than kind of in an unprecedented way. How are you all thinking about that? And it can be connected to Possip, just in general, like outside of Possip, just teacher praise in general.
Well, with Possip, as a principal, I would immediately, when I saw the report, cut and paste and send it to teachers or whomever the staff member was that the parent was calling out, because all the time the teachers would say, I needed that, like, ooh, today was the day. And just that one little, you know, Miss Reed is awesome, just saved the rest of the day. So I would send it to the teachers through email immediately. And then at our faculty meetings, I would showcase, like, as a school, our Possip reports and how we're progressing.
I think what's so powerful about that is because sometimes as teachers too, you start to assume that all parents think about it like their complaints or frustrations because you're used to hearing that, but then you get to see like, no, parents have a lot to share. And thank you, they share the praise at the end of the weekly meetings. But I think, and then we had some administrators who they had multiple ways that they were getting praise for teachers. So one avenue might have been Possip, but then they also had a shout out board for teacher to teacher. So just lots of different ways. But to your point, Dr. Conley, like just the importance for there to be a way for them to hear it. And it does, especially when it's specific. There's another note in there we share as part of our family engagement weekly report and our Sunday notes. That's awesome. And then they also track successfully versus meaningfully engaged families. So love to hear more about that. But we only have 2 minutes left. So we are running short on time. Is there anyone who's got something that I know Corey or Aaron, Dr. Rodriguez, anything that you didn't get to say as we're getting ready to close out? There's so many great ideas coming in the chat as well.
I just wanted to add that closing the loop is really the most important part, and being able to build in accountability in making sure that we're responding to the needs of our staff and our parents is really important to me. So I've been able to use that quick copy feature or email feature to send over those concerns, and then I am able to then close the loop with my administrators to make sure that we're responding to needs as they come up.
I was going to say also, when it comes to communication, I think knowing the score, like knowing how my child is doing academically, like if I know the score, how they're doing, I can keep up on top of them to make sure that they're turning their assignments. I can make sure that they're not losing things in the book bag. So I think like if I know the score, I know how to coach my child. Like I'm the number one coach, I'm the number one cheerleader, and I'm here to do that with teachers. And I think if I know, and that's that communication piece, then I can do better.
Corey, you're speaking to me. This has been actually on my mind lately, especially now I have a 5th grader. And so you want them to be more independent, but I'm like, they don't even know how their grades are made up. So I need to be able to help them. The other thing, and this is a whole topic for another time, is sometimes I need to make sure that the school knows what my expectations are, because sometimes what they think they think is good for my child and what I think is good for my child may not be the same thing. And so it helps me be like, okay, I know that you may not be concerned by this 80, but I might be concerned by this 80. And so let's kind of talk about that. So anyway, definitely co-sign that. All right, Caitlin, what are we supposed to be doing now?
Well, we had so much fun talking that we are at the top of our hour, so we're not going to do any more slide sharing. We're just going to say thank you. I know Chima wants to say a note to anyone who needs to get in contact, but we're just so excited to help you guys close out this year. We've released some new data and dashboards for schools, so check that out if you haven't, and you'll continue to hear from me until summer and you're free. So we just really thank you for being here with us. Chima, what note did you want to let everyone know before we go?
Yeah, so I know we know many of you here already are current Possip partners, so thank you. We appreciate the work you do to engage with your staff and family in transformational ways. And we love working with you and are excited to continue our partnership next year. If you're listening to this and you're interested in learning more about Possip and how our multilingual feedback platform and data reports can assist you in your parent and staff engagement efforts, please email me at Chima, CHIMA @possip.com. That is Chima, CHIMA @possip.com. And I would definitely love to be a partner with some of that strategic thinking moving into the future.
Whoop. All right. Thank you so much for being here. Again, this was a historic thing for us, and we loved having all the parents and partners together, and we will do it again. Everybody have a great evening, and we appreciate your time. Thanks,
y'all.
Bye.